I was raised in a small village 20 miles north of New York City called Elmsford, New York. I was born in 1945, and I didn't leave Elmsford, Westchester County, until I was 17 years old. It was a village of about 20,000 people. My home was a foster home. I grew up in a foster home. My mom was 16 when she had me, and she had the advanced intelligence to understand that she could not take care of me. And so she placed me in the arms of a 67-year-old woman named Carrie Taylor. And Carrie Taylor is really my mom, both the woman who raised me and my spiritual mother. The spirit's really important in this story, in my life, but I didn't understand it when I was 17 or any of those years that preceded 17. Growing up in a foster home, I always understood from my social relations that I was different. And the difference that I understood was that I didn't have the kind of brotherly, sisterly relations that my friends had. And there was always something in me that was yearning for that. And that sense of discomfort that I had with that is one of the things that drove my life and drove the fear that my life was really about. My young life was a life lived in fear. That's probably 14 or 15. I had my first run-in with the police. And those run-ins continued from age 14 to 17. At 17, I got a warning from one of the lead detectives in town. He told me that the next time that they picked me up, they were going to send me upstate. And upstate at that point meant Sing Sing. I figured my best bet would be to get out of town, to go find my way out of town. And the way I found out of town was into the U.S. military. I went into the Air Force when I was 17 years old, stepped off the plane in Lackland Air Force Base, Texas, and understood that I had made a colossal mistake, that I had to find a way to live with. And I found a way. For 2.5 years, I found a way. It was through alcohol and drugs and violence. And I had used violence as a way of life in Elmsford to protect myself. Because of that fear that I had of people, I used violence to protect myself, to keep people away from me. Well, 2.5 years in the military, in the Air Force, was enough for me to understand that the rumblings that I had had as a younger person, the push against authority that I had, I came to understand it in the Air Force. And I came to understand the racial nature of it in the Air Force. Got out on Lincoln's birthday, 1965, and eventually went to work for General Motors. Worked 89 days, and then they laid me off. And that kind of soured me even more. So by the time July of 1966 rolled around, I was really ready for prison. I hadn't done anything to go to prison, but I was ready for prison. And the ancestors had enough faith in me to give me a timeout. I went up to Springfield, Massachusetts with a friend of mine on, I think it was the 2nd or the 3rd of July. And I was coming back to Springfield to pick up my former roommate and some other friends from the Air Force, and we were all going to the Newport Jazz Festival together. Well, Walker was his name, Dwight Walker. Walker had a party on the 4th of July. At that party was a young woman named Carolyn Willis. Carolyn was 16 and pregnant, and she was engaged to one of the guys who I had been in the service with. Carolyn was murdered that night by somebody at the party. Her body was found 3 or 4 days later in the park that was across the street from Walker's apartment building. That Friday afternoon, the police picked me up and took me to the station. And I guess they kept me there for 8 to 12 hours. And then they let me go. And I went back out into the community. After about 36 to 48 hours, somewhere in that range, they were asking me to come back down to the station. I went down to the station and I never left. I gave them a confession to something that I didn't do. It didn't dawn on me the position that I was in until October of that year. when the judge said, "And may God have mercy on your soul," and pronounced the death sentence. That's where my life began. The me that is sitting in front of you now, that's where my life began. The old life ended with "May God have mercy on your soul." I went to death row, and for the first 3 to 4 months, anybody I talked to, I would tell that I wasn't guilty and I had no business on death row. And one of my cellies, one of the guys who was on the road with me, said to me one day, said, "Don't you know that everybody in here is innocent?" And it registered. And that's the last I told people. I came into political consciousness that day. Unfolding before me, late 1966, 67, 68, on the television in front of my cell was the quote-unquote Black Revolution, Black Power Movement, Black Revolution. America's cities going up in smoke every summer. The reclaiming of African identity by people of African descent here. Negroes and colored people were becoming Black people and Africans, and I was among that number. And that came to me at an educational and academic and emotional, psychological, and a spiritual level. It was a total transformation. I understood that the state of Massachusetts fully intended to take my life. And I had to understand why I was in the position I was in, how I got there, and who I was. So everything that I did, everything I read, every act that I took was about that. It wasn't about getting off death row, and it wasn't about getting out of prison. I didn't read any law books. I didn't read any case studies, none of that. Everything that I did was about finding out who I was before I died. I was on death row for 5 years, 1 month, and 4 days, 1,861 days I was on death row. And in that time period, there was a radical transformation. The most important action that I took on death row was an action that I took with Pete Ledetto and James Flowers, both tier mates with me. On Palm Sunday, 1968, I had been on death row for a little over 2 years. I had not been outside. All that I could see was the tops of trees in terms of nature. 1 shower a week. The food that we were served in metal trays was slid on the floor underneath the cell, and we said we'd had enough. So on Palm Sunday, we said we were going to church, but our intention was not to go to church. We bust into the deputy superintendent's office. We took the deputy superintendent and 5 guards hostage and made demands. The demands that we made were that we wanted to be treated like human beings, that we wanted to be released from our cells on a daily basis, that we wanted to be able to shower on a daily basis, that we wanted to go outside. We didn't have anything to lose. We were ready to do violence to the people in that room that day. But fortunately, the people in that room that day kept their heads level. They remained level-headed. And the superintendent, Palmer Scafferty, allowed us to talk to the media and told us that our demands were under serious consideration. And so we let the people go. And we were locked up for the next 6 months. We got even less time out than we had before. But everybody else on death row, that same month, everybody else on death row was released from their cells. Cell doors were open. They got an opportunity to go outside. So the things that we demanded, we got. We just were on delayed reaction. That was the most important thing, action that I took. The other thing that was important was that I found writing. I found a way to express myself in a way to release that tension, that trauma that was in me. And writing did that. And I remember writing this poem called Attendee for Tamu. And I'm going to read that. Attendee for Tamu. And you talk about the revolution and how you're going to change the world. Change yourself. And you talk about the revolution and all power to the people. Talk about yourself. While doing the same old jive things in time, the larcenous rhyme, ripping off nickels and dimes, and time to your greed, your psychological, self-conscious need for things white, things not of or like you and you. Talk about the revolution and how you want to bring it to the people. Bring it to your people. Bring it to yourself. Here you come, intellectualizing black pain, a 400-year hurt you want to represent as the revolution. Represent yourself. Don't come around our daughters playing your intellectual games, talking about Marx and Lenin and Engels and Debray, Che and Castro and the thoughts of Chairman Mao and Uncle Ho's Victory Garden. Telling our daughters to follow in their likeness because they be righteous revolutionaries. And our African fathers are just simple children in the wilderness waiting to be led again, needing your strength and wisdom to lead them back to things African. Don't you come talking about those righteous revolutionaries. Though I love the sounds of their names, the spirit in which they came, the legacy of love that sustains, don't speak as though you be righteous or revolutionary. Tell me of yourself, of how you dispossess things African for the intellectual ramblings of other nationals. Tell me of your blackness, of your Africanness, and how you lost it in the wake of Marxian dialectic, just gave it up for the unfulfilled dream of revolution pinned down in theory between a white woman's legs, and how your revolution is black following white still. Still, still you tell me of your revolution and I'll tell you of your revolution. Tell me of your revolution and I'll tell you of your revolution. Of your mama with her back bent over white folks' stoves, putting elbow grease to Miss Ann's floors. And I'll tell you of your sister and how the raping came and went and came again, leaving her stranded on the block, deadened by emotional shock. And I'll tell you of your woman and how she slaves for you while you go off to fight other wars in white folks' beds, leaving her need unfulfilled by your intrigue and impotence. And I'll tell you of Angela. And I'll tell you of Tamu, who is Angela, and of the struggle to be a nation, and of Tamu, and of the sisterhood, and of the change. And I'll tell you of Nikki and Sonia, of Nina and Lena, of Betty Shabazz and Fannie Lou Hamer. And I'll tell you of the wisdom of Ella J. Baker and Shirley Graham Du Bois, and of Aretha. And I'll tell you of the revolution you missed, are missing, go on missing every time you hang your head in shame or psychologically disclaim or make excuses cause Moynihan came and ran a game you swallowed on the evils of a matriarchal society and benign neglect. And how your mind so white can't meet her eyes, face her, who is the revolution, is the only revolution, is the light and thunder of all those games you be playing with revolutionary socialism, which is communalism from whence you came. But now you want to credit Marxian dialectic for the light of life burning in your African name. And her, who is the revolution, is the only revolution, and who waits on her warrior to come home to the Africa of her love. So the revolution, talking about a real revolution, talking about a change from all those Negro games revolution, talking about a change. Look deep inside and you'll see the revolutionary strength of the enslaved daughter who is your woman, your mother, the bearer of your nation, the healer of your universe, the African lily of your seed, changing. I said, changing the whiteness of synthetic Marxian dialectic to the spiritual truth of trains love supreme. A change in your mind revolution. The only real must be primary revolution. And if you listen, you'll see how you're no longer the shadow of anything white, but the substance of a black woman's love. Postscript. And the snow in spring fades away into, changes into, is absorbed and transformed into the rich soil and subsoil of Mother Earth. Wrote that a sister named Pepsi Charles had a program called The Drum on WBUR radio in Boston. And Pepsi read that poem on air, and I heard it. And that was the first real reflection of myself that I could see myself in. That's the first time that I really saw myself, who I was. And from there on, it was a joyous fight uphill to claim that identity, to clarify that identity, and to enjoy the life that I had. In June of 1970. It was June 14th, 1970. I got a decision from the First Circuit Court of Appeals overturning my conviction on the basis of Miranda, Witherspoon, and Escobedo. I hadn't been given the warnings that police were supposed to give me. I hadn't been told that I had the right to a lawyer or to remain silent. So all of that came out because the police simply thought they had a slam dunk, and so they weren't as cautious as they should have been. And on August 16th, 1971, a guard came to my cell and told me to get my stuff together. I was going home. It was hard leaving. I knew I had to go and I wanted to go, but it was hard to leave. It was hard to leave those men who had helped to shape my identity, who had helped me to find myself. I caught the bus outside the prison, went to Boston, found Pepsi, and spent a day with her just talking. And then I went home a couple of days after I got out and began to try and fashion another life. That's the skinny of it 51 years ago. 51 years ago, I got off death row. But I'm still there. Because death row didn't imprison me, it freed me. It freed me from the stereotypical Negro life that had been fashioned for my people. Freed me from that. It freed me from the idea of America, from the myth of America. And it freed me from the myth of an Africa that was Tarzan running through the jungle, beating Africans. Freed me from those mythologies and gave me space to get information that would contextualize my life in a way that would allow me to live out the rest of it with dignity and humanity in a way that was free of the fear that I had known as a child. But I didn't really throw off the final vestiges of that fear until I turned 70. And I got on a motorcycle and I took a cross-country trip. 48 states, 382 days on the road, dealing with the fear firsthand. What began with a life-death sentence culminated there with the release of that fear. And so for the last 7 years, I've been living fear-free, trying to figure out what the next steps in my life are. That's the story.